Alright, today's video is about Division 2 yet again, but it's not so much an analysis of the mechanics or trailers or information we have thus far, and it's more a direct comparison to the original game. I know I've done this sort of stuff before in the past, but hear me out on it. I recently posted a video titled Division 2 Here Comes the Greed, which voiced my opinions and concerns on monetization practices, prices, and the really overdone pre-order system they're utilizing, which made mention of stash space being a component of the Ultimate Edition, and there were some other topics in there as well. But the main takeaway that I drew and built the video around was the use of free DLC as a smokescreen to further monetize to a higher degree behind it than they would have otherwise. I still think that that's the case, but some of the comments and viewer feedback on that video went down a very different tangent that I really did not intend or wish to provoke. I, as well as many others, this is by no means unique to me, view pre-orders as an almost universal evil within the industry. Not physical disc pre-orders at your local GameStop, mind you, digital pre-orders where there is no inventory to run out of stock, and in reality, no practical reason to pre-purchase whatsoever other than included incentives that the publisher tacks onto it. Furthermore, the fairly recent industry practice of sometimes closing off the beta or demo offerings and only inviting those who have already purchased the game is ridiculous. Using the very thing that is supposed to let players decide whether or not they wish to purchase a product as an incentive to fully purchase the product in advance is backwards and absurd. A decent amount of comments on the previous video revolved around the theme of, well, that's it, I'm not going to play this game now, which really was not the goal that I had. There was also a healthy amount of comparisons to the original game, voicing concerns that the sequel would revisit some understandably frustrating patterns that Division 1 displayed. For instance, a downgrade from the E3 graphics, stripped out features, hacking issues, etc, etc, etc. All this was used by some as a justification for already writing off the game completely, and I don't really agree with that. Despite some troubling announcements, then again, when has any upcoming release only ever exclusively had amazing announcements that the community loved, but that's beside the point, the game is not on track for a similar Division 1 release day scenario. I know this for one major and very specific reason. The reason is the matching playable from E3. Most people watching this will have seen the footage 100 times in 100 different ways, regurgitated back for various commentary videos or analysis segments all across YouTube. The same footage I am using right now, but the part a great deal of players are seeming to forget is that the footage is a literal reveal of the gameplay from the actual literal game. Brushing past some of the smaller concerns like running animations, and for some reason that's a point I have heard people complain about frequently, and they have cited it as an indicator that the whole game will be terrible, which is kind of a WTF moment for me every time I read it. But anyways, brushing past that, the game demo featured a large selection of core mechanics which could be used in a free roam environment and functioned in a very specific design-intended way, which helped solidify, in my mind, the fact that the sequel is a far better composed game than the original. The first Division was an absolute mess. No one who says otherwise should be taken as any form of credible. It was delayed multiple years, and the footage shown at its E3 reveal was a stone-cold, categorical lie. It was based on non-existent material, comprised of elements that were not even close to real yet, and over-promised in almost every single metric. This set the game up to have a really rocky start, and that's exactly what happened. Factor in some engine issues, a hacking problem, and an understandable lack of community goodwill post-release, and it made for a long, arduous journey back from the depths. But regardless of your views on individual set balancing or which patch was the best, the original game made at least some, if not most, of that climb, and now sits in a distinctly superior position compared to its launch day. I have had some gripes with the game in the past, but most real players have at one time or another, unless they are some soulless, mindless yes man. But from what I have seen and everything I have gathered, the two games stand in stark opposition both in quality and design intention. Division 2 and all of its marketing is based on an actual tangible product, whereas the original was all based around a what if we did this cool thing type of scenario, which then turned into a oops, we can't actually do hardly any of these cool things scenario, and then on to, well, it's been delayed a few years already, I guess it's launching like this then, final verdict. In contrast, the sequel is now a, well, that didn't go well the first time, let's not market something that isn't real type of scenario. All this is not to say that I don't have some problems with individual elements within the game, and will be extremely vocal about that over the coming months. Inclusion of functionality bonuses, i.e., stash space, etc., is something I just have a problem with, but it's not in the realm of this game will obviously be terrible yet. It's not even close to that. When it comes to microtransactions, I have heard a few different sides, but a lot of people criticize my open disdain for Division 1 loot boxes by citing them as being cosmetic only, so it doesn't matter. In one sense, yes, but in another, no, not at all. Having cosmetic items available for purchase is one thing. When there are options available with a flat rate and a you buy it, you get it, you know what it is sense to the whole thing. Loot boxes are not that. They include some of the coolest things in random algorithms that make them exceedingly hard to acquire instead of just tagging them with a higher price. The truth of the matter is, loot boxes, even cosmetic only, are highly profitable because they trick certain people into spending more than they otherwise would have with flat rates. I fundamentally disagree with that premise and concept, but again, as long as Division 2 does not stoop as low as mechanically functional items in loot boxes, or currency packs, or consumable boosters, it's not a deal breaker for me in its entirety. The game itself, the PvP, the loot grind, the missions, they don't hinge on what your player looks like. And as I stated before, we as a community are not going in this time having been sold a bill of goods with an airbrushed fake Instagram model-esque trailer on our minds. Another area where I yet again voice concern, but definitely do not want to inspire viewers to write off the game completely, is the beta. The positive thing is that the Division 2 beta is a double-pronged setup. On one hand, there will be random invites sent to some players, and that's a great thing. It allows them to experience firsthand whether or not it's worth the purchase. It allows a social aspect as they describe the game to their friends, and it helps seed the market with more knowledge to make informed decisions. On the other hand, the beta will also be available to those who pre-order, again using the thing that is supposed to let you decide whether or not you even want to spend money as an incentive to pre-spend money with not a whole lot of information on what you're getting. Yes, it's possible to cancel or dispute a charge or otherwise undo the purchase, but truth is, it's a hassle to do so, and it is a known fact that paywalling the beta, especially if it's paywalled behind more expensive editions, even partially, boosts pre-order sales and gives more money sooner. And that all ties back into publisher versus developer dynamics, but that's a video for another time. The main takeaway I want to promote is that we as a community, especially you diehard fans out there, you know exactly who you are, need to hold companies accountable and in check, but do so in a reasonable way with expectations that can be articulated, defined, and backed up. The Division 2 is not going down the same road as its predecessor. The truth is, the game is vastly superior to its counterpart already, and it has been for some time. The truth extends to the fact that the engine has been upgraded substantially, allowing for a better overall product with, hopefully, air quotes around that, less of the prominent issues the original game suffered from, and across the board there is a different approach to the mid-range development process and marketing tactics for Division 2. I still firmly advocate against all pre-orders, any and all of them, but I also recognize the intense desire some must feel to experience the beta. It's really a hype topic right now, and after waiting patiently for their code, if they don't get one, they will end up pre-ordering to gain access. But remember, if you do not like the product, cancel that order, dispute the charge, do whatever it takes to not give Ubisoft a dime if the product is not something you actually wish to purchase. The Division 2 is dancing around a very thin line of maximum monetization without significantly hurting its credibility and player-based sentiment. They are flirting with that line as hard as is humanly possible, and when it gets crossed, the community should hit them hard and hit them fast, decisively, damage their earnings, damage their street credibility in the gaming market as a whole, make them feel it, because without that sort of gut punch, things do not and will not change for the better. And when I say change, I just mean revert back to before they did that scummy thing. The constant state of change, quote unquote, we experience in gaming is just a spiral of further squeeze tactics for profits, and the change, again, quote unquote, we incur is no change at all. It's just undoing one, maybe two steps on that downward spiral back to when things were not quite as far down. The important thing to remember, however, is that the Division 2 is not Division 1, and a large number of parties involved have made great efforts to prove that to all of us. It's easy to base expectations off of prior experiences with Division 1, burned. With Destiny into Destiny 2, extra burned. But even as pessimistic as I can be at times, I feel a sense of responsibility to make this video and express that despite individually troubling practices we are seeing peek out from under the rug in Division 2 right now, the conclusion and first response should not be hatred, anger, and ridicule directed at the development team, or a sentiment that the entirety of the game is garbage and there is nothing worth analyzing, playing, or potentially purchasing. That should not be the go-to response. Response I hope to inspire is less an impulse reaction to individual things that crop up in Division 2 that concern us, something that I've been guilty of in the past to be sure, but more a sense of cautious and careful optimism this time. The game has stark differences to the original in a very deliberate way, and is not going down the same path. It's a different tone than I normally have, but we'll see how the video goes. If you want to support the channel, please consider checking out the various pieces of Division-themed merchandise down below, as well as some other upper echelon apparel products, and a whole bunch of links as well in the description. I live stream on Twitch once in a blue moon, and when major releases hit the market, I will be on there much more frequently, but right now, not so much. Also, we have independent gaming forums where the community can get prepped up, not only for Division 2, but discuss a huge selection of games and topics. Alternative to that, you can join our Discord server, bookmark the Amazon shopping link if you want to support that way, and on the list goes. As always, thank you for watching. Let me know your feedback in the comments down below, and have a nice night.